Hi everyone, my name is Teresa Thompson and I'm RECO's Stakeholder Engagement Manager. So welcome to this afternoon's Tariff Interoperability webinar, where we'll be talking through the Phase 1A implementation update, what that means for your organisation, what the Phase 1A delivers, and what activities suppliers should be progressing now, including the build and testing, and how RECO will support industry through the implementation and readiness ahead of the February 2027 go live. So we've got some dates there. Just some housekeeping rules before we go. So if we could just ask if everyone can keep their cameras and microphones remain switched off during the speaker sessions. That really helps with connectivity and any background noise. We encourage you to submit any of the questions that you have throughout the event in the Q&A Teams function that you'll see the Q&A icon on the top bar. And as just a polite reminder, we just ask everyone to keep all the questions relevant to the session and try to avoid referencing other organisations. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording and the slides, along with any of the key updates or any questions that have been taken during the course of the session, we will share it onto our website with some key communications as well. So before I hand over to Chris, I will just quickly run through the agenda. So we've got Chris Stock and Paul Crauken are the main presenters today. So Chris will take you through the November TI consultation with background of the governance response and just a quick overview of what tariff interoperability means if there are that are just joining and trying to bring themselves up to speed. We'll then walk through the project overview and the Phase 1A timelines, the test and plan approach, and we'll also look at the consumer consent and the tariff interoperability integration. What are the next steps for the project? And then we'll do a closeout with the Q&A and AOB, which gives people an opportunity to raise their hand with any questions, or we'll run through whatever you guys have submitted through the Q&A. So I think on that note, I'm going to hand over to Chris Stock. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Teresa. To introduce myself, as Teresa said, my name is Chris Stock. I am the lead of Tariff Interoperability Workstream within RECO, and I'll be taking us through today's presentation along with my colleague Paul. So key objectives for today is to firstly to make sure everyone understands what Phase 1A delivers and what that means for their organisation. Secondly, it's to explain what activities suppliers and TI users should now be progressing, particularly around reviewing the technical artifacts and commencing build, and finally how to explain how RECO will support industry through implementation and readiness ahead of go live. So before we do look into all of that, first I thought we'd spend a minute just reminding ourselves what tariff interoperability actually is and why we're doing it. So tariff interoperability forms part of DESNZ's wider Smart Secure Electricity Systems, or SES program. The overall objective is to enable greater consumer-led flexibility by making tariff pricing information available in a consistent, standardized way across the market. Today, suppliers publish tariff information in many different formats through different mechanisms. That means anyone wanting to compare tariffs or build services around tariff information has to integrate with each supplier individually. Tariff interoperability aims to address that by defining a common API and a common set of data that suppliers will use to publish tariff pricing data. That means that TI users such as optimization services can retrieve tariff pricing information consistently across suppliers without needing bespoke integrations for every organization. It is the aim that this will help consumers benefit from lower costs while supporting wider flexibility initiatives across the system. Following publication of the government response in May, the policy decisions have been made and the project is now moving into its implementation phase with a focus on moving away from defining what direction tariff is taking into helping industry successfully implement it. So if we move on to the government response. So a little bit about the government response. In May this year, DESNZ published its response to the November 2025 consultation. That document represents a significant milestone for the project because it establishes the policy position for tariff interoperability and confirms how implementation will proceed. There are some key messages we'd like everyone to take away from that response. First, the government has confirmed a phased delivery approach. So this is phase 1A and phase 1B. Phase 1A is going to focus on delivering public tariff pricing information by February 2027, while phase 1B will introduce consumer-specific tariff information integrated into the consumer consent solution, and that is slated to go live for November 2027. Secondly, the phase 1A API technical specification has now been baselined. Suppliers should now be building against that specification. A further technical consultation later this summer will cover the API technical specification and associated technical documents. That consultation is intended to finalize those technical artifacts rather than redesign the solution. The purpose is to identify genuine defects, ambiguities, or implementation blockers that may have been discovered during build or testing. It is not intended to reopen policy decisions or fundamentally redesign the API. It is worth emphasizing this as we do not currently expect any material changes to the phase 1A design. We therefore strongly advise suppliers to commence or continue their build activities now rather than waiting for the consultation to conclude. Finally, the government response confirmed that the new REC schedule and associated license conditions that underpin the implementation are now implemented and live as of the May date. So our message to both suppliers and TI users is review the technical artifacts, begin implementation now, and use the consultation to highlight any significant issues that would genuinely prevent successful implementation. We feel that feedback is very valuable because it allows us to identify and resolve genuine issues before the technical artifacts are formally incorporated into the REC, where changes can become more complex and time-consuming. It also helps us to maintain confidence in the February 2027 implementation date. While the consultation does provide a formal mechanism for providing feedback, we would also like to encourage ongoing engagement through implementation. If you do identify a genuine defect rather, ambiguity or any sort of blocker, please don't wait for the consultation. Please let us know as soon as possible. At the end of this webinar, we have included various ways you can engage with the project team, including the working groups and the mailbox, or your OAM if you have one if you're a supplier. I will now hand over to Paul. Paul, can you please introduce yourself and then take us through a little bit of what phase 1A entails?
Thanks very much, Chris. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Croken, so I'm the project manager for RECO on the Tariff Interoperability project. So I'm just going to go through now the phase 1A delivery timeline and summary. So here we go, just a slide here. So what is phase 1A? So in May this year, we published the government response. So in response to industry feedback, the decision was made to split phase 1 into 2 separate stages. The phased approach helps address concerns around implementation timelines and alignment with wider industry changes. So phase 1A is now scheduled to go live in February 2027, with phase 1B following in November 2027. So what will be delivered now in phase 1A? We'll have a public tariff data only. This will be where suppliers will expose publicly available pricing data through their own API using common specifications set out into the REC, including domestic and non-domestic tariffs generally available to multiple customers. No consent authentication, so no customer-specific data exchange, which will mean no identity or authentication framework will be required. It'll also mean early consumer benefits with low complexity. And finally, domestic suppliers and non-domestic suppliers who supply above the threshold of 100,000 meter point. So what does this mean for RECO and its central capabilities? A supplier register, which will be hosting supplier API endpoints, monitoring capability, which monitors API availability and other metrics, and validation tooling and sandbox to validate the implementation. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So why have we done a phased approach? So following industry feedback from the consultation in 2025, November, one of the key themes raised by industry stakeholders was the timelines for phase 1 and concern about its perceived overlap with the consumer consent implementation. Feedback highlighted a reluctance to invest in developing a phase one solution if it was likely to be replaced shortly afterwards with consumer consent introducing in early 2027. So we've split these into two separate phases for tariff. So phase 1A delivery is in February 2027. So within that delivery, we'll have a public tariff data via API, no consent required, supplier-led build, and early consumer benefit. So what are the benefits for doing this? It's an early delivery, it reduces complexity, no duplicate builds, alignment with CCS, and lower risk across both deliveries. So what does this now mean for phase 1B, which will be delivered in November 2027? It will mean a customer-specific tariff data. It'll integrate with the consumer consent solution. There'll be no separate consent bill required, and it avoids duplicate supplier effort. Next slide, please, Teresa. So now we're moving on to the implementation timeline for phase 1B. So this just highlights the high level what these perceived timelines are for the next 9 months. So from May 2026 to January 2027, there'll be the supplier build and testing against the webbooks. August through to October 2026, this will be where we'll have the API technical spec consultation. Following that, the REC technical implementation in October. This is where we'll be consulting on the API technical specification, EMDS, and standard definition document. October through to December 2026, this is the stage for suppliers to receive resolution on operational readiness, including endpoint provision, until 31st December 2026. In January 2027, suppliers to issue director level management attestation by the 8th of January 2027. Just want to highlight here the reason why we've got that deadline of January 2027 on the 8th. It's to set out to provide RECO with sufficient time to complete implementation readiness activities ahead of go live. So just for yourself, what does this include? So it confirm receipt of participant attestations, following up on missing or incomplete submissions, validating operational details and resolving outstanding implementation issues, also while ensuring all participants are prepared for phase 1A implementation date of the 18th of February 2027. Finally, I just want to reiterate the consultation will finalise technical artefacts in October 2026. It will not redesign the solution or reopen policy discussions. I'll now pass back over to Chris to run through the test approach and plan.
Thanks, Paul. I'd like to spend a few minutes explaining how testing will work and what suppliers and TI users should expect over the coming months. So our overall approach is deliberately proportionate and supplier-led. So RECO isn't centrally certifying supplier systems. Instead, suppliers remain responsible for demonstrating their own implementation or making sure their own implementation complies with the REC requirements and is ready for operation. We've structured the approach around some key stages. Firstly, we're currently performing a pilot test with a small number of parties. This is intended to validate the implementation artifacts, so the API tech spec, the test workbook, guidance, and any supporting documentation. Also to identify any major improvements or obvious defects ahead of the consultation and before wider industry testing begins. Suppliers will then undertake their own testing using a published test workbook and associated guidance. This provides a consistent baseline while allowing suppliers to supplement that testing where appropriate for their own implementation. At the conclusion of testing, suppliers will be expected to complete a management attestation, confirming that the required activities have been completed and that they are ready to operate the live service. RECO will be taking a risk-based assurance approach using information available to focus support where it's most needed, rather than applying the same level of scrutiny to every implementation. It is important to stress what RECO's role is and isn't. We won't be certifying supply systems or approving implementations. Responsibility for compliance does remain with each supplier. Our role is to provide a framework, guidance, the tooling and support necessary to enable suppliers to implement consistently and confidently across the market. For TI users, Testing remains voluntary during phase 1A. However, we'll provide testing facilities and actively do encourage participation, as feedback from TI users will be vital in validating the solution works for them. Supplier testing is expected to run from October to January, as Paul indicated in the previous slide, which we believe will give sufficient time to complete implementation ahead of the February go live. Move on to the next slide, thank you. So how are Retco going to be supporting industry? So before we do move on to phase 1B, I wanted to just cover this. So we recognize that implementing something like this does involve much more than simply publishing a specification. That's why we're providing some additional support across 3 broad areas. So the first area is a range of technical elements, including a validation capability or sandbox, test workbook, and a supplier register to support implementation and testing. Secondly, we'll continue publishing and maintaining the documentation needed for implementation, including API technical specification, the standards document, the test approach and plan, and any additional implementation guidance where required or requested. Finally, we'll continue engaging closely with industry through the Implementation Working Group, or the IWG, the Tariff Interoperability Working Group, or the TWIG, and our ongoing query management through the mailbox, as well as any bilateral meetings that you may request. Those forums are particularly important because they allow us to answer implementation questions openly, share learning across industry, and identify any blockers or things that are going wrong early on. Speaking of that, one message I'd really like to reinforce is please engage early. If, as you begin implementing the API, you identify a genuine defect or some sort of blocker, we do encourage you to raise it through the mailbox or call us or engage it in the work groups as early as possible. This gives us visibility and the best opportunity to resolve that issue before the go live. Our objective through implementation is straightforward, just to support industry in delivering a consistent, interoperable solution by February without creating unnecessary governance or process. So we want to help as early as possible. I'll now hand over back to Paul, who will give us a brief overview of phase 1B and how it aligns with the consumer consent solution. So Paul.
Thanks, Chris. So this slide highlights the key deliverables for phase 1B and the consumer consent solution. So as we'll see from the slide, phase 1A is unchanged. So what does that mean? So there's no consent required for public tariff pricing data. Phase 1A implementation is unaffected by phase 1B. Continued building against the API tech spec. So the go live for that, as discussed previously, is February 2027. What does phase 1B provide? It integrates with CCS, suppliers to verify the consenting individual is the account holder. CCS manages consent journey with supplier validating consent is in place before sharing data. Covers one-off provision of consumer specific tariff identifier and ongoing event notification with a go live for the back end of November 2027. So the benefits of this approach: a single consent mechanism, no duplicate bills, reduced complexity and lower risk in delivery. Next slide, please. So this is now the phase 1B timeline. So as you can see on here, the purple highlights the CCS and what is being delivered ready for MMP in March 2027. The light red shows the next steps for TI. So we're just going to focus on the TI today. So phase 1A, government response was completed in May 2027. The API tech spec consultation will run August through September, with supplier build and testing to run from October to December. Looking then for an implementation of phase 1A in February 2027. For phase 1B, this will be currently in design phase for phase 1B, ready for consultation in September through October. Consultation responses to be issued in February 2027. Following that, it's ready for supplier development testing for go live in November 2027. Next slide, please, Teresa. So this be where we'll just go through the next steps. So what should suppliers doing now? So we've obviously had the government responses back in May 2026. The API specs technical specification is now baseline. So we would strongly recommend that organisations do not wait for the up and coming technical consultation before starting development. The consultation is in August and September and is intended to finalise the technical artefacts. The earlier you start to build, the more opportunity there is to identify any significant issues, while there is still time to address them before implementation. We also encourage suppliers to review the test approach and test workbook so they understand the testing activities that will be expected later this year. If you do identify any genuine issues, please raise it as early as possible through the query tracker or working groups. Continued participation in both the implementation working group and the tariff interoperability working group is also important. These forums provide opportunities to raise questions, share experiences, and discuss issues openly with industry. Although today's session has focused on Phase 1A, we would encourage organisations to remain engaged with the development of CCS and Phase 1B discussions over the up and coming months. There will be a second consultation later this year, which will provide the opportunity to shape these arrangements before detailed implementation planning begins. Next slide, please. So finally now, I'd just like to reiterate what the next steps are for Phase 1A and Phase 1B. So Phase 1A, the consultation will begin at the back end of August and will run through September. In parallel with that, there'll be the Phase 1B consultation, which will run through September to the middle of October, spanning over 6 weeks. From July to January 2027, that's when we'll be doing the supplier build and testing ready for director attestation in January. And finally, there'll be ongoing work streams from now through to delivery, which will be engagement through the industry working groups, whether that be RWG or TWIG, operational readiness planning, and query management. So if you've got any questions, please email the tariff interoperability at retailenergy.co.uk mailbox. Next slide. I'll pass back over to Chris now.
Thank you, Paul. That concludes the main portion of our presentation, and we'd like to open the session up for any questions you may have. We do appreciate that was a lot of information covered today, and we're happy to answer questions on any aspect of the Phase 1A implementation, testing approach, or the upcoming consultation. If you're asking a question relating to Phase 1B or consumer consent, we'll do our best to answer that at a high level today. But as Paul mentioned earlier, there will be dedicated engagement and consultation on those arrangements later on this year. I would also say, if you want to think about this and have questions later, once again, as Paul iterated, we can respond to those through the mailbox. But there have been 2 questions so far in the chat, and I'll just read them out and then read out some answers. So Lisa Perrin-Shaw noted in slide 8, if you are a non-domestic supplier with less than 100,000 meter points, you do not need to submit tariff information for Phase 1A. So yes, this is correct. These rules are set out in the Electricity Supply License SLC 11C, paragraph 3BI. Just to correct the slide a little bit, this is non-domestic only, and this exemption does not apply to domestic electricity suppliers. Suppliers who are not mandated to provide tariff data can still opt in, however, into the tariff arrangements. This, for example, affects gas tariff users. Thank you, Lisa. Next one. So the next one is, where can I access the draft API specification? So this is from George Barnes. So the link to the developer portal, which is where the API specification is held, is available on the REC website and also, I believe, the REC portal. What we can do is we'll at the end of this slide, there's already a link to the website. However, as part of the post webinar comms, we can share it in that as well, the direct link to the developer portal. Next question from Jeremy Yap. Will you email the slides after this, or are they on the website? Both, actually, Jeremy. So we will be emailing these slides, including any Q&A from today, through the email. We will also post this video on the website. So if you want to rewatch any aspect or look through the slides, they will also be on the website, which we'll have a link to. I'm not seeing any additional questions at the moment, but not to worry. If you do have any thoughts or questions, as I've mentioned a number of times already, please do. I encourage you to engage with us. We want to talk to as many people as possible. So I will. Oh, there is one more thing. Oh, thank you, Carolyn. Let me just, there you go. I thought the exemption was non-domestic supplier with under 100 domestic suppliers, but if any size non-domestic supplier, indeed one suppliers. Okay, I will pause that one for a quick second. Can we just go on to the last slide? Oh, Teresa, your slides are showing something else. Do you want to close off with some final thoughts and share the link, and then I'll return to that for a second, Carolyn. Okay. Slides seem to have disappeared. However, before I respond to Carolyn, because I've got my little helpers drafting a response to that one, I just want to thank you all for your time taken to join us today. I just want to leave you with key final messages. First, phase 1A is now firmly in implementation mode. Government response in May confirmed the policy position, so that's fully established. Secondly, suppliers should be reviewing the published artifacts and progressing their builds now. Thirdly, there we go, finally we got the slides up, thank you. Thirdly, we'd really encourage organisations to engage with us throughout the implementation phase. And finally, RECO is here to support industry throughout implementation. Over the coming months, we'll continue providing guidance, supporting testing, responding to queries, and working with suppliers and TI users. We would encourage everyone to continue engaging with us. Okay. My little helpers have helped me. Thank you. Thank you, helpers. Carolyn, to answer your question, suppliers will need to review their license obligations. We can provide a specific response on this post meeting. So Carolyn, we can reach out to you and have a quick call with you to go over this and confirm.
Oh, I think we've got, is it Mike? Mike's raised his hand. I don't know if you can take Mike off mute, Laura.
I wouldn't know how, so Laura will have to help us on that one.
Yeah,
Hello,
Mike should be able to speak.
Yeah, I've unmuted. Thank you very much. Yeah, just piggybacking on Lisa's question. My understanding from my regulation assurance and compliance department was that we had a full derogation as a B2B supplier, but we've certainly got way over 100K. So can I also get that clarification, please? Because I've been working to their mandate, because obviously they're the people who specialise in licence conditions.
That is a very good point, Mike. So I think what we can do is this point does seem to require a bit more clarification from us. So what we can do is we can draft up a guidance note with very clear guidance on this particular issue. We'll share it with you and Carolyn and Lisa directly to get your initial feedback, and then we'll share it wider with industry. Does that work?
Does work. Funnily enough, I've got a backlog quarterly planning session tomorrow, so sooner rather than later would be great, and I can hopefully kick the door down if I need to. Thank you.
We'll engage with you directly, and then we'll engage wider with industry. I think we'll also do the same on some of these other questions. I think some of these questions do need a bit more thought. So what we'll do is we'll take these offline and draft them all up with a nice, proper, formal response and send it to you post-meeting. We do have another hand raised, though, if we want to have them jump in. Carl Dennis. If we can figure out how to unmute Carl.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just in terms of the 100,000 consumers, it's 100,000 relevant consumers. So you could have a portfolio of 1 million non-domestic, but if you've got less than 100,000 of relevant consumers, then you'd be exempt. And then you just need to look into the license definition of relevant consumer to go and work out whether that applies to your organisation or not.
Thank you, Carl. We'll put that in writing now.
I think we've still got a couple of hands raised. Is Carolyn? Carolyn, I think you got your hand raised. There might be one other.
It might just help for context here. I didn't mean to stimulate a side debate, but in the previous webinar, a small non-domestic supplier who was under 100,000 said that whilst they never intended to register a domestic, they'd had a small number of change of use that they still retained the supply for. And in that webinar, it was confirmed if they supplied any domestic customers, even though they were non-domestic customer, less than 100,000 relevant meter points, they would need to apply for derogation. So I'm just really trying to check if that is still a valid advice or whether anything has changed that I may have missed. That's where the question came from. I think it is a really vital point. Otherwise, everyone under 100,000, I think they're just automatically exempt. But if the advice is if you've got any domestic customers in that 100,000 portfolio, then you need to apply for derogation or you need to conform to the school.
Carolyn, off the top of my head, I do think you're right. I think your interpretation is correct, but I do want to confirm off camera with my team, and then I'll confirm writing with everyone, if that's okay.
That's fine. I appreciate everybody's view. I'm sure it's much better informed than mine, but if I can actually have a response with your provenance, that would be appreciated, as you've already stated. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike.
I do see a couple more comments in the chat. I don't know if I have anything information-wise on top of that. So I think what I will do is see if any of my team are able to provide any of those answers quickly in the Excel. Otherwise, I will suggest that we capture some of these responses and send them offline. I'll pause just for a second, see if my wonderful technical helpers have any immediate answers. Otherwise, I will thank everyone for joining. Oh, someone is typing. Okay, cool. I'll pause for just a moment. So I've seen a question from Emma Johnson. Do export tariffs include FIT or FIT tariffs? Oh, that's one. Doesn't quite seem the answer to that one. Emma, I'll take that offline with you. I think there might be a couple of answers because some of these are getting quite technical and I'm not sure of the answer. But okay, so Andrew has just provided a response. Export and FIT are in the license requirements. So hopefully that should be fine.
What we'll aim to do, Chris, is we can publish. So any questions that have been submitted, we put the formal answers and we'll put them on the website with the copy of the slides. So it's quite, people have got those responses. But any of those that are looking for the more immediate responses, we can do that as well. Mike, if you've got your meeting quite soon. Emma, I think you've also got your hand raised. I don't know if you can take yourself off mute or if we need to do that for you.
I think someone might need to help Emma come off mute.
Oh no, I might be off mute, or it may have been someone else helping me. Sorry, I just felt someone just seemed to say an answer on the export and FIT, but I didn't catch what it is. And I can't see where you said it was written somewhere, but I can't see it.
Right, so we've got a separate thing just to help me answer questions so that I don't have to think on top of my head.
Oh right, okay.
It's not a public one, it's just my personal helpers. Someone in our little helper group has written export FIT license confirm what is in or out, but we can come back to you specifically to confirm, Emma.
Okay, yeah, so I'm probably not the only one who needs to know that. It's just basically, is it just the same tariffs which we set? Because you could sort of, if I were designing it, I probably wouldn't include FIT in 1A, but I think you probably do want it in 1B if that's what customers want. So I just don't know, and we're not at all clear. We're trying to scope what's needed at our end at the moment, and we're not clear on that.
That's fair, Emma. That's some interesting consideration to include something in 1B and not 1A. I think what we can do is we can take that away, discuss it, and then provide a response to this group and industry in general on the various different types of tariffs that would be included, like FIT and other bits. Cool. Okay, right. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your questions. Anything that we haven't answered in this question log, or if I haven't answered sufficiently, I do apologise. Thinking on top of my head isn't my strong suit. So I will get to the team on some of these answers and send them out post-meeting, including this recording. So thank you all for attending and for your questions and your engagement. And once again, encourage you early engagement with the mailbox, and smarter people than I can answer your questions for you. I will wrap that up now, and thank you once again.